many things affect your life as much as slow traffic and bad weather. Listen tomorrow morning for Traffic and Weather Together every 10 minutes on the 9s on KSL News Radio.
Hopefully we don't have too much bad weather here soon. These dark, dreary nights and the weather.
I want a month of blizzards.
The weather today. The weather today reminded me like, oh yeah, we're in the thick of the winter. But hey, Cougar Nation rolls on. We're in mid-season form.
Winter's not even a month old.
I know it already just feels. I enjoyed San Antonio too much. That's 78 degrees. The Riverwalk, it was wonderful. Anyway, Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you here on Cougar Nation. 801-575-8255. The question today as we recap the 2024 BYU football season, how will you remember this 2024 BYU football team? Let's get out of the phone line and welcome in Ryan from Tooele, who's patiently been on hold. How are you going to remember this team, Ryan?
I'm just going to remember this team and this season as the impressive bowl game win against the projected number 1 round draft pick and the Heisman winner.
I love that, Ryan. And you know what? That is a great point because Colorado might have the top 2 picks. I think does that add to the special nature and kind of validate that this team was one of the best BYU teams of all time?
Yeah, it really does. Thanks
for the call, Ryan. We appreciate you hopping on board. That was pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Shedeur Sanders, I don't think he looked at his best, but I love that those guys played. Shedeur took a beating, too.
Oh, yeah.
BYU was all over him. Raider to Mooney, Tyler Batty. I mean, even that touchdown pass he had to Travis Hunter, Batty laid him out, and he was able to complete the pass. But I think it was interesting, too, in that game. And you'll relate to this, Matt, because I know if you hear this, if you're a Jazz fan, you're probably going to be very upset with us. But Matt and I are resident Laker fans here on. Maybe we get a side hustle. We can have a Laker Nation. That's right. But at Jazz Laker games here in Salt Lake, there'd always be a gathering of Laker fans around the tunnel to see Kobe or LeBron come out and see the superstars. That was the case at the Alamo Bowl. Tons of people waiting around the tunnel to see all the stars from Colorado. I bring that up because I'd never seen that from a college football game. Usually college football athletes are not, paparazzi worthy. Like you're not gathering around a tunnel to see, ooh, all the stars are rolling out. And it was that with Shedeur and Travis Hunter and then Terrell Owens. And then, holy cow, there's 2 chains rolling out. I'm like, this is insane. I've never been part of this. Usually I'm used to seeing, maybe the celebrity watch at BYU games is like an apostle or something. This is a little bit different, seeing 2 chains roll out. But, it's again, for BYU to capitalize, caps off an amazing 2024 season and one of the best teams, I think, in BYU football history.
Texter 7491, we beat Utah. That's something that will always be remembered. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of positives from this year, Mitch. There were some memorable close wins. There were some heartbreaking losses. I'm going to remember 2024, sadly, as a year of missed opportunity. When I was watching that Arizona State-Texas game, I could not help but feel like BYU would have been in the same position against most teams in the playoff. In a tight fourth quarter, with a chance to win. Now, Arizona State didn't make the plays. They had a 4th and 13 that they gave up to Quinn Ewers, and Texas ultimately won that game. But I could not help but feel, especially because those all happened after BYU had soundly defeated Colorado, I could not help but feel like this could have been and should have been BYU. If they had just done 1 or 2 things differently in the Kansas game, in the Arizona State game, they could be here. They could be having a landmark moment. The way that people talk about Arizona State right now, it's like the last 10 years never happened. It's this program on the ascent. They've got a great quarterback. Their coach is unbelievable. That could have been BYU. And it probably should have been BYU. But it's not because it slipped through your fingers. And so I can't help but feel like, although a great year, 11-2 is a great year, and there's so much positive stuff to take away from it. I don't want to take away from any of that. There's a lot to build on. But with 10 years from now, when I think about 2024, I'm going to think about that was the first 12-team playoff, and BYU should have been in that thing, and they weren't. And it still hurts, Mitch.
Coming into the show today, our producer, Nate Slack, who you can follow on X, Nate Slack 5. He always holds it down, gets people fired up on X.
He does like to stir the pot.
We love it. We love Nate. He said coming into the show prep, and I want to pitch this your way. knowing how the outcomes ended up, BYU has a blowout win over Colorado. Would you replace that for a loss, first-round loss in the playoff? Like what Arizona State experienced?
100%.
You would have taken the path of what Arizona State had. Even if with a loss. Were you in with heartbreak?
Even with the heartbreak and the loss. Because from a fan's argument perspective, you would always hold, like, not a trump card because you lost, but you could always say, we were in the first ever 12-team playoff. Was Utah State in that? Was Utah in that? No, we were in it. But you don't have that. And then the momentum gained, we just heard Kalani in the last segment talk about the momentum gained in the offseason. You gain a ridiculous amount of momentum from making the 12-team playoff and not even winning. Even teams that got blown out. SMU is talking about, we're on the ascent, we're building something here. No one's talking about getting blown out by Penn State. They're talking about being a playoff team and about being a perennial contender in the ACC. And that's what's happening to Arizona State. Everyone looks at Arizona State and says, they're going to be back. They're going to be competing for the Big 12 championship. Keep an eye on Arizona State. No one's saying Scadaboo's leaving and, it was a nice one-year thing. It's all said and done. I think all the positives that we're talking about from the win against Colorado would still be there. Plus, you would have played in a meaningful football. Think about the value even losing that game would have to Jake, to LJ, to Chase. These guys coming back, having played on the biggest stage in this sport. Yeah. I absolutely would prefer to be 10 and it'd probably be 11-3 because you would have had to win your conference championship 11-3 and you lose in the playoff.
You convinced me. I would have said Colorado Alamo Bowl, but make a good point because being in that field, being in that 12-team field would be an accomplishment. Just like getting the NCAA tournament is a big thing for any school, and I think for BYU basketball, they're going to obviously, whether it's this year and the years to come, go deep, and just getting a bid won't be good enough. But getting into that field is always an accomplishment, and it's something that you go into the Marriott Center Annex, and it's got a bunch of NCAA tournament bids, like just getting into that field. So I think that's a fair point. I just love the way that game played out, though, against Colorado because it was so complete, and I love that BYU played a complete 60 minutes. And there were even stretches in that game where Jake didn't look great, and you're kind of like pulling your hair out at times with some of those passes, but man, they overcame everything and they always had an answer. And it was just the complementary football, the complementary nature of this team, special teams, offense, defense. They found ways to score in a variety of ways this season. And when you just kind of take a step back and getting ready for this show today, just looking at the stats, the balance, it was just really an impressive season where you had so many guys contributing at a high level. Maybe they don't have the bona fide Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders type stars, but man, this was a really good football team, and they put out their best product in that Alamo
And one
Bowl.
of my favorite parts about this team, Mitch, was this staff, obviously led by Kalani, he's the head coach, they opted to develop in the offseason. They did not overhaul the roster. 2 years ago, it was a massive dip into the portal, and it was roster turnover like you and I have never seen before in our lives. And the cohesion, the chemistry, it never quite came together. And then in the offseason, they returned nearly the entire football team. And they developed, and there were questions, and they were doubted. You mentioned the 13th selection in the preseason poll, and yet guys emerged. Storylines developed. I loved that about this team, that there's guys here that you can get behind as a fan that will be here for 2, 3, 4, even 5 years. You can develop that relationship with them and root for them. I love that about this team.
Cougar Nation, sponsored by Central Bank. We'll take more of your phone calls, 801-575-8255. Talking and recapping the BYU football season in 2024. One for the record books. We'll talk about it more next here on Cougar Nation.